Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Lovestream.
Hello. Happy Sovereign Sunday.
I like that. Sovereign Sunday. It's like, we come to church on Sunday and remember that we're sovereign and talk about it and fellowship about it. I like that idea. That's cool.
Awesome. So happy
Thank you for
Sovereign
joining
Sunday. Thank you for joining us on this Sovereign Sunday. So this week we are talking about ghosts of relationship past.
Ooh, spooky.
We should have saved this topic for Halloween. So where do we get started?
Well, I guess we get started with how this came up. Now, obviously, this has come up in the past, but it just kind of popped up again this week. So we've been doing some renovations in our apartment over the last couple of months during the quarantine. And so as we've been doing this, we've been decluttering and going through closets and pulling out stuff. And so we found some souvenirs from past relationships. And so I, in particular, found a painting. It's a poster of a painting, a print of a painting that I love. But this painting has a connection to one of my previous relationships. And, Vanessa knows about it. Like, she knows the connection. She understands. And I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about, why. But so basically, I was like, oh, I love this painting. Like, I kind of don't really have that strong connection to my ex anymore with that souvenir or relic. But so I was like, oh, I want to get this framed and finally put it up. I've had this print for the relationship was like 15 years ago at least, right? I don't remember, but it was a long time ago. And I've had this print that long and I never put it up. So I was like, oh, I want to frame it and put it up. So we're going to Michael's to get it framed. And I asked Vanessa on the way, I was like, you're cool with us putting this up, right? And she was like, well, that's connected to your ex so-and-so, right? And I was like, yeah, kind of, I love the painting. I guess I kind of discovered the painting during that time, and it's a romantic painting, right? And we tend to romanticize our relationships and kind of, imagine ourselves that we are like the knight in shining armor and
star-crossed lovers.
Yeah. And our partner is the damsel in distress in the painting. Like, basically that's kind of the theme of this painting. So I was kind of, yeah, it has like an affiliation with that. Yeah, sure. So I didn't understand that embedded in that question was kind of she didn't want to say, no, I don't want you to put it up. But there was kind of like, it was supposed to signal to me, I guess, that she was uncomfortable with it. But it didn't penetrate my thick skull. So we're continuing on the way, and I'm holding my poster on the way to Michael's. And it wasn't until like literally I was with the guy getting it talking about the framing options. And I asked her for her opinion about the frame, and she was like, I don't care. And I was like, you don't care? We're going to hang this in our home. And so that's what finally she expressed. Well, I don't really want to hang it. I was going to let you hang it. Like, I wasn't going to make an issue out of it, but maybe I should let you speak for yourself on that. Tell us what you were feeling.
Yes. So when we were leaving and he said, there was a print I wanted to frame, and we have quite a few prints that we want to frame. So he ran up to get it. And then when we got back to the car, we identified what it was. And I was like, oh, and like he said, I was like, isn't that the print that you've associated with so-and-so? And he was like, yeah, but, I really like it and whatever. And I was like, okay. And so, yeah, there's the part of me that is like, I don't really want a print in my house that's going to be associated with an ex of his. But at the same time, is it really that big of a deal? Like, if he's saying that there's no association there anymore, or that he just genuinely loves this print regardless of the association he's made with his ex about it, then, who am I to stop him or prohibit him from putting up this print? So there was definitely a struggle within me of like, is this a big enough deal to say, no, this is a hard no, I'm not allowing this painting in my house? And I didn't have that reaction of like, hell no, I'm not allowing this. Unbelievable that you would even suggest it. It really was just like a struggle. Like, oh, do I really need to make a big deal about it? And I wasn't making a big deal about it. In Michael's, when he asked my opinion about the frame, I didn't have much of an opinion because I really didn't care for having the print in the house. So if he was going to frame it, it was up to him to choose the frame for it. I really genuinely had no opinion about it.
She was so not making a big deal about it. She like really didn't even want to talk about it. And that's when I realized, oh, wait, there is a problem here. There's something else going on because she has no opinion about this. Okay, so then we need to discuss it.
So then he asked, so is it that you really don't want me to put it up? And I said, well, I just brought up the fact that it's associated with your ex. So no, I mean, I don't love the idea of having this up, but it's up to you. I mean, if you really want to put it up, put it up. And that's genuinely my feeling about it. And I don't know if at times this seems like maybe it is like emotionally like spiritually bypassing it, or I don't know, this
what? To not say
the idea to be like, all right, well, I don't care enough to make an issue about it. You know what I mean?
I think let's talk about that. Like, you can express your feelings about it without making an issue out of it, right? Like, making an issue out of it, that phrase like conjures up, for me, it conjures up like the idea of we're going to fight about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, I didn't want to have a fight over it. I didn't think it was a big enough deal to have a fight over it. I considered that if he put it up at some point and it was up, maybe after a while, it wouldn't mean anything to me, right? It wouldn't have an association if I saw it. I don't know. I didn't want to make a decision to say, like, this is a hard no and I'm going to fight you over it. And I didn't think he was going to fight me over it either. It just was one of those things that was like weird. I felt like it was a weird situation of, is this a big enough deal to even have a conversation over? But then as we were having the conversation, some other stuff came up, right? You brought up the fact that while cleaning out the closets, in one of the boxes, I have a photo album of my marriage to my previous husband. And, you said, well, you have this. I mean, I don't have it out on display or wasn't planning to frame it or anything. But it was there. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize. I can understand why, if you're going through boxes and you find a wedding album, you might be like, why do you still have this? And I totally get that. But, when I moved back into this apartment many years ago, I just brought all the stuff that I had in my old apartment, and that was in one of the boxes. So it wasn't a thing that I like really went through to try to declutter and say, all right, I'm going to get rid of everything.
So you didn't make a conscious decision.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I want to keep this. This is really has sentimental value. I mean, at this point, I've blocked my ex-husband on all forms of social media because we did not have an amicable separation. So it's not like I have this attachment or need to keep it. It was just one of those things that all the stuff, I literally moved out of my old apartment in a weekend, so everything that was in my house got thrown into boxes and just moved. But yeah, I mean, that was a definitely, I could see why that would be perhaps triggering in the sense of like looking at it and being uncomfortable with it.
But for me, when I saw the album, like, yeah, did I have a little bit of a trigger? Did I feel like, oh, why is she still holding on to this? At the same time, I've also been married before. So I was like, okay, for whatever reason, maybe she feels awkward about throwing it out. It's an important time in her life. Like, I don't know, maybe she's not ready to. Like, I never brought it up. I never mentioned anything about it because I just didn't. As a matter of fact, I did. And I don't know if I was being passive aggressive, but I basically made a comment like, oh, you have a bunch of stuff in this box in that closet. Could you go through that so we can clear space, right? Knowing the album is in there and thinking, oh, she'll go through it and get rid of it now.
And see, but it wasn't clear enough for me to know that that was
Yeah.
really what was in there. And so I was like, all right, there's lots of stuff I got to go through. Great, like more stuff. I have no problem getting rid of things, and this is one of the things that we were bringing up with this conversation, is that different people have different thresholds of what they're willing to hold on to, what is important to them, and what is triggering to them.
I'm a hoarder, so I like to hold on to everything.
And I am willing to let go of pretty much everything, and really to cut ties with people once they are, I don't want to say like that they're not necessary in my life. That sounds harsh, but like once my chapter with that person is over, I'm okay with letting go. I have no problem with that.
And I have insecurities that I like to hold on to. She says I hoard friends. And I think it's true. Like, I will try to do everything possible to like keep a relationship alive, right? Like, where whatever kind of conflict resolution we have to do to get to a place where we can at least be friendly or civil with each other. And that includes with my exes. And that has been an issue with Vanessa because she's on the other side. She's like, well, you're not with them anymore. Why do you need to be friends with them? I think ultimately, right, whether it's we're talking about saving relics or souvenirs from relationships or being friends with them on social media even, there are people that I've been involved with that I am friends with on social media, and people that I am not, right, that I've had to block or maybe they've blocked me. That's certainly the case in some cases. Kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think ultimately it all comes down to insecurity, right? And there's nothing wrong with insecurities. We all have them. There's always this like feeling of, so this particular poster came from a relationship that I had that was very passionate. And so like, I can understand it being intimidating. I'm not so intimidated by her ex-husband, but she had another relationship that was very passionate that I'm more intimidated by. And she was friends with him on social media for a long time. And that bothered me more because it's like, you always feel like, am I being compared to that person? Is this relationship as passionate as that relationship was? Does he miss, or does she miss that person or miss the passion from that relationship? Right? Like, those are totally normal feelings. And sometimes they manifest over silly things, like, right? Like, it seems like not a big deal. It's a poster.
Yeah.
Right. But I recognized, and that's why I wasn't like, just a poster, get over it. Like, I recognize all that, like, kind of emotional baggage that comes with that. And that's really what the issue is.
And I have a tendency to kind of, sometimes Danny gets frustrated because I don't voice my opinion right away. I'm not as impulsive, I think. I tend to think about it first. All right, so I am in this situation. He's talking about framing the poster, and I'm like, is it a big deal? Do I really need to say no to this? Can I just let it go? Can I work through that and just be like, all right, it's just a poster? Or is this something that's really going to bother me? If he gets this framed and spends $250 on a frame and then it's up in the house and I'm like, God, I freaking hate this poster and I want it down. Will he be like, I just spent $250 on this frame?
Well, I'm glad she told me before I spent any money to frame it.
So I do sit and think about things very carefully. I don't want to be impulsive. I don't want to say no to something right away and then feel like I've taken something from him or, I don't know, like repressed you in any way. So I try to be very mindful of that. I try to work through the feelings that I'm going through. And yeah, at the time when we were picking out the frame, I was like, the truth is I'm not really interested in having this poster because of that association. And it's not to say that I'm afraid that Danny is going to look at this poster every day and be thinking about how much he misses his ex-partner. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But I guess there was something about it that made me feel a particular way. And at the end of the day, it had to come out and I had to say it. And we had the conversation. He brought up the album at that time. He was like, well, there's stuff that you have also that that I haven't asked you to throw away. And I was like, I'm not asking you to throw away the poster either. but yeah, let's talk about it. What else is there that might be triggering to you? I have no problem closing cycles. I was friends with my ex on Facebook for a while. I mean, we kind of went through phases of sometimes unfriending each other, friending each other again. I don't know. I think we had different opinions at times. But I did have a moment of speaking to that ex and saying, hey, I want to get some things out in the open and communicate with you things about our relationship that perhaps I hadn't said during that time. I kept having dreams, and that ex was coming up in my dreams. It wasn't anything like, oh, I want to get back with him, I'm in love with him, I have feelings for him. It was just, for some reason, he was coming up in my dreams, and I had a conversation with him. We kind of got some things out in the open that maybe we hadn't said during our relationship, or while our relationship kind of drifted apart, and we cleared the air. We said those things, and it was like a closing of a chapter. And very recently, I had another ex that I dated, I don't know, like maybe 15 years ago. Also, it was a really long time ago. And we were friends on Facebook, and we happened to talk one day. It was right after I posted my thank you plant medicine story on social media. And he was asking questions about my healing process. And then during the conversation, he was like, I got to go with my wife. And he just ended the conversation. And I was like, oh my God, if she is uncomfortable with him being friends with his ex or speaking to me, I'm out of here. I don't want to have any problems. I don't want to be the cause of anybody's insecurity. And I unfriended him. I mean, I didn't feel the need to say anything because we didn't really talk that much to begin with. But it was like, all right, I don't want to put myself in this situation. I don't want to put him in that situation, or his wife in a situation where she might see that we're friends and be bothered by that. So I was like, all right, time to let that go. And I ended that cycle as well. So I have a much easier time, I think, letting go of people. And I think that that's something to take into consideration, that we all have those different, I don't know, thresholds of acceptance, different boundaries. There are people that are totally okay with their partner being friends with their ex, and that's great. And then there are other people that are just not okay with that. And maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's past traumas, maybe it's insecurities, who knows? But I guess I don't feel like there's a reason to judge anybody for their different boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me with the poster, in the end, I let it go. For me, it's been 15 years. I never put it up. I'm not going to miss it all that much if I don't put it up now. It's not that big of a deal. Right. So it's not something that I would want to constantly trigger her over in her own home. So I just let it go. But I think what's important is not necessarily how you deal with it. Right. I'm not saying that everyone in this situation, if you have a relic, you should get rid of it so you don't trigger your partner. There may be times when it's appropriate to get rid of it. There may be times when it's more appropriate for the partner to kind of work through. Actually, I think it's probably always a combination of both, right? I think we both I should be willing to compromise and let it go. And you would be willing to work through whatever issue you have with it to make it a non-issue, because either way, we don't want it to be something that's there, like that insecurity about that ex, right? Mm-hmm. Or some kind of belief that I still have a connection to her that would come between us, right?
Yeah.
So I think some of the tools to mitigate a conflict like this, and obviously this was like a small conflict, but these things can turn big, and they have been big in our past, right? We have definitely, there have been times in our relationship where things like this were much worse arguments than they were yesterday. But is anybody else having these types of experiences in your relationship? Drop a comment and tell us your story. We'll be happy to put it up and maybe talk about that as well. But I think the tools that we need to use to mitigate these conflicts are, first of all, vulnerability, right? Vanessa didn't really want to tell me. I think, were you afraid that we were going to argue about it?
No, I think like I said, I like to kind of think about it first myself and try to figure out, like, where is this coming from? What is it exactly that I'm feeling? Am I insecure about this? Am I uncomfortable? Is it rational? Is it irrational? Like, I tend to put my feelings through a ton of filters first, like, before I can communicate them.
And not me. I'm the opposite. When I feel or think something, right out of my mouth it comes. And, obviously I'm trying to, maybe it's not obvious, but I'm trying to develop more discipline when it comes to that and think first before I speak, right?
Yeah. So
for
I
everyone
think
else's benefit and for mine.
I think at first I was trying to figure out if I was, if it was an overreaction, if it was really that big of a deal. And, when it came time to picking out the frame and everything, I was like, all right, well, the truth is I really don't care to have this poster up in our home. And like I said, I was still having the feeling of, like, maybe it really isn't that big of a deal. Like, maybe it's not that significant. But at the same time, I had no interest in picking out a frame for it because it didn't, I had that association in my head, which I think part of our work in that situation was kind of discussing that, right?
Mhm.
Sharing that, saying, I do kind of feel uncomfortable about you putting up a poster that at one point was a symbol of your relationship in your mind, right?
But you were vulnerable about it, right?
Yeah.
You could have just said, I don't really care, pick whatever frame you want.
Yeah.
You could have walked away to go look at something else.
Yeah.
But you were vulnerable enough to admit at that point, like when I pressed you a little bit, like, yeah, like, I don't really feel like doing this.
Yeah.
So vulnerability is really like community. So I didn't get the hint in the car on the way over when she said, oh, isn't that connected to your ex? And I was like, yeah. Right. I didn't catch that. So I think be vulnerable, communicate clearly.
Yes.
I mean, obviously you want to do it in a way that's not like confrontational, like, oh, you're really going to put your ex's poster up on the wall? Really? Right? Because that's going to provoke a fight and that's not going to be productive.
Yeah. I think it was at that point, it was very like, all right, the truth is I don't really feel comfortable with having this poster on our wall.
And I wasn't like, so what I ended up doing was I didn't throw the poster out. I left it on the, like where they do the framing, they have like the big countertop, and I just kind of left it there because I was like, it's a shame for the poster to go to waste. I'll just leave it here and maybe somebody else will take it. Maybe they'll like it and they'll take it.
That's great. I mean, I was kind of surprised, like when he came back and I was like, what'd you do? I was like, oh my God, did you forget the poster somewhere? Because he went to get something. You were getting like command hooks or something. And he came back and I was like, oh my God, did you forget the poster somewhere? He was like, no, I threw it in the trash. And I was like, oh my God, he threw it in the trash. And I kind of felt bad. Like I didn't mean for you to just throw it in the garbage. I mean, it is a nice poster. But I mean, I'm glad to know that you put it out and hopefully somebody else will take advantage of it and put it up somewhere.
But I didn't feel like, and then she thought that I was upset about the fact that I was throwing it out. And honestly, I really wasn't. It's just something I found in the closet after cleaning it. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Let's put it up. And, it wasn't like I really had any strong emotional attachment to it. I think there have been times when in our relationship where it was more upsetting to me, or I wanted to hold on to friendships with people that I may have been involved with. Like I have some, like there were flings maybe where it wasn't anything serious and like, it's no big deal and we're still friends. And there have been times that she's been uncomfortable with that. And so I've had to let some of those friendships go. And those I resisted a little bit more. Like I feel like, but it's a friendship, right? But in the end, if in that moment she was uncomfortable with it and that was her preference, we have to decide whether it's something we want to stand our ground about, right? Like someone I barely interact with, but just once in a while on social media, is it that big of a deal? No. So I can let that go, obviously. And then there are other people that I'm still friends with who are exes where it wasn't as triggering to her because she understood the context of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, we're friends with your ex-wife. So, yeah. I mean, we've developed a relationship where it's, Danny's ex-wife is going to be in our lives forever because there's a child involved here.
Mhm.
And we can work through that, and we've managed to get to a point where I think we're pretty good friends. We talk about not just parenting, but sometimes other stuff that's unrelated.
She talks to her more than I do.
And
really
so
does.
and so, like I think there are definitely things that we can work through, and we can figure out compromises in. And obviously, as this comment is saying about the self-confidence, I think obviously we will get to a point where that confidence will be so strong that it won't even matter. I think over the years we've struggled because, as we've mentioned many times on this live stream, that we've taken our relationship to like the brink of death, probably.
The pit of hell.
And
we've been to hell and back.
And so, we're still on the upswing. We're working our way back up where things like this won't be triggering and won't be an issue. And but in the meantime, we're also allowing those things to manifest, to work through it. If I just suppress that and shut it down and say, forget it, I'm not going to bring this up, I'm not going to show him that I feel this way, or I'm not going to be vulnerable, then that causes all sorts of resentments to kind of be there,
bubble under the surface,
and
then she'll explode next time, right?
Yeah.
Next time I find something small, oh, this was from when I was with so and so. This was a gift from so and so.
I mean, I don't think we'll get there anymore, but it's because we're working through the little moments that
if you suppress stuff.
Exactly. And so the fact that, you were able to be empathetic and say, all right, I understand that. I think there was a little frustration because Danny was like, you weren't honest from the very beginning. And I was like, okay, but it wasn't that I was lying to you. I was literally trying to work through the situation myself. I honestly was trying to do that without having to have a full conversation about it. In my mind, I was like, is this really significant enough to have this conversation?
And I think T is right. Like these are ongoing things where they may come up again and again. But hopefully, if you're doing your work, because I know this is true for us, that as we progress, as we continue with our healing journey, like these things are less and less triggering. Like 5 years ago, this would have caused a major fight. Today, yesterday, it was just kind of like a discussion. There wasn't really, it didn't get like really emotionally charged. Yeah. It wasn't. So, and yeah, maybe we'll have issues like this till the end of time, but I feel like they become less and less of a stumbling block, less and less emotionally charged, and eventually, hopefully, there won't be issues at all anymore. But thanks for that, T.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's all a learning process. And like I was saying, because we've gone to such, we've taken our relationship to such a deep, dark place, kind of the comeback is we're starting to shed some of these things. We were talking a few weeks ago about the Taoist form of learning, of ascension, of consciousness, and how it's layered, it's circular. And sometimes we'll be revisiting.
Like my tattoo.
Yes. So sometimes we'll be revisiting situations, and like Danny said,
I am here.
We'll have a situation manifest multiple times, and as it continues to come up, the emotions are less potent. We're less reactive about it. We are able to work through it. Whereas in the past, this argument might have lasted a few days or maybe a few hours if we were on a good, in a good place. Yesterday, it was that short conversation. I mean, maybe we had like a 30-minute conversation trying to fully understand it, because that's one of the things about what I experience is that when I have certain emotions, I like to understand them. Where's this coming from? Why am I having this feeling? Why was I triggered by this? Is it really rational for me to be uncomfortable by this? Should I have just allowed you to put the poster up? We talked through all of the potential situations from this experience. And so it's really interesting to kind of work through those together as a couple, because then we know how to maybe deal with it going forward. And going forward, maybe we won't have to even go through all of that.
these are all learning experiences, because these tools can be applied to any conflict that you have.
Yeah.
So every time we work successfully through a conflict, it teaches us how to mitigate other conflicts, and we'll just continue down that road to have less and less. And that's kind of what that idea is, how it's like really spiraling. You're going around in circles, having the same issues over and over, and then maybe you kind of going more into like a lazy spiral, and then it starts to like straighten out towards the top until you reach enlightenment up at the thing. I'm like totally off with the mirror of the camera. right. And then as you get more and more enlightened, it's more of a straight line.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is anybody else having any of these types of issues, or are we the only ones? Like, I feel like these are probably pretty common, especially in the age of social media. Like, these are pretty common conflicts to have. Like, why do you want to be friends with your ex still?
Yeah. I was reading an article the other day about something related to that, and it was talking about the different reasons why you would be friends with an ex. So the one friend that I recently cut off because I realized that his wife was not okay with us being friends. We had been friends for a really long time. Our friendship was a lot longer than our relationship. So to me, it was like, we've been friends for so long that it doesn't, the relationship was like a blip in our friendship more than the other way around. And so I was comfortable with, this is a friend who not only that, but lives in another state, like on the other side of the country, or, like far away, where it's not like we're meeting up for coffee or hanging out or anything. And we weren't even really communicating as much. I think we spoke like maybe once every couple of years. So it kind of was, it was easier for me to say, you know what, this isn't really like this big of a deal. It's not really worth making his wife uncomfortable. And I wouldn't want that. In the past, we've been in places in our relationship where I think there was more insecurity, which is why you might be more uncomfortable with me having certain friends, being friends with certain exes, and I felt uncomfortable with you being friends with certain exes. And, I think one of the main things that we spoke about from the very beginning was that the most important thing was communication, for us to be open and honest with each other. If you're speaking to an ex, let's talk about it. Let's say, mention it in passing. Hey, by the way, so-and-so reached out and we spoke for a little bit, and, that's it. It doesn't have to be like a transcript of what the conversation was about, or any of that, or like show me the call logs, or show me the text messages. But just open enough so that there are no surprises.
Yeah, we've definitely had some of those conflicts where I've spoken to exes, and not that she didn't know, but like I wasn't telling her every time. And so like sometimes there was one instance where it happened where randomly the ex reached out to me and we had a conversation, and then it was like we were talking every couple of days, not deep conversations or whatever, but it ended up where the frequency of the communication increased, and it just kind of happened like under the radar, where like I didn't even realize. And then she saw some of the messages and she was like, "You've been talking to this person for like almost every day for like the last 3 months." I was like, "What? 3 months? Wow, no." So, and that was a case where it was like, okay, that was a slippery slope where I didn't even realize. It just kind of fell into where it became a habit that we were texting each other every once in a while. And it became concerning to her. So like that was something that I had to pull back from and be more aware of, and make a commitment that like, yes, when I speak to her, I'll let you know. So that way it's not like a surprise. Like you're not going to see my phone and all of a sudden realize there's 3 months worth of text messages there. And she saw the messages. She could see from the messages there was nothing, like there was no flirting. It wasn't like that, right?
Yeah, no, it was. I
remember. I hope not.
But
that would have been good if she would have been like, actually,
it can become a slippery slope, because I think at the time what was a little bit concerning was that once those messages were very frequent, there was a little bit of complaining about like partners at the time, right? Like,
and that's
that can be the slippery slope, right? Yeah. I don't think that any exes should ever be complaining about their current partners to each other, because that can turn into something.
Well, when we were together, we didn't have that
happen because we romanticize our past relationships.
Sure,
and I've been guilty of that. I had an ex and the one that I had to have the conversation with and kind of explain some things to, where when we were in some of our darker periods, I would message him and like just complain, and that was not okay. I mean, that could have turned into something slippery, like a slippery slope as well. And I had to pull back from that and say, look, hey, I'm sorry that I reached out to you during these moments and said these things. It wasn't intended to imply anything. I didn't want to, it was really just the place that I was at the time. And back then it was when we were really like struggling through our relationship, drinking a lot and being just completely reckless.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because actually I had thought about that like a few minutes ago. That is really you reaching out to him while we were fighting was one of the things that did make me very insecure about him particularly. And the fact that you were still friends with him on Facebook and, still obviously still talking, that's even over the years, like that kind of, again, it was kind of like with maybe a little bit more than the wedding album, right? Like it bothered me a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that I was going to tell her, I don't want you ever speaking to him again or anything like that. But I was definitely happy when she had that kind of final closure conversation and wrapped it up. Although by that time, our relationship was secure enough. We had
definitely shifted, and that's what I mean. I feel like there are definitely levels of where it depends on where your relationship is. If you're going through a really difficult period and your partner is speaking to an ex, it could feel a lot worse, right? It can seem a lot worse. They may just be saying, hey, how's it going? How's life treating you? It's great to hear from you. But to you, if you're struggling through a difficult moment in the relationship, that can, your mind can go all sorts of places. And for us, we had to come back to this place of working fully on our relationship, on helping each other feel secure, working on ourselves individually and together as partners, to get to a place where that's more comfortable, where it's understandable now if his ex reaches out and wants to have a conversation with him, he's explained it in the past, like, oh, so-and-so reached out. Okay, cool. How's she doing? It's not as scary anymore because we're in a much better place. Yeah, I agree.
That's a great alternative. What I would say is, if you feel like you want to have a relationship with your ex, I guess you should be looking inside about why, right? Because that's energy that you're putting into that relationship. And look, obviously, just being friends with them on Facebook, liking a post once in a while or making a comment once in a while is very different than like texting, at whatever interval it is. Texting is certainly more intimate. Or talking on the phone or meeting for coffee or any of those things. But all of that is energy that you're putting into that relationship with your ex, when you could be. And that was really one of the things I think helped change my mind about hoarding friendships with my exes, was like, that's energy that I prefer to put into my relationship with Vanessa, to continue to heal it and make it as, the best relationship it can be. Right. So I think you have to really look at what is it that, what's the real motive? What's the motive? Like, why do I feel like I need to have, anything more than just kind of like a casual, like, hi on Facebook once in a while kind of thing, right? What are you getting from it? Is it that you find something lacking in your current relationship that you're getting from that ex? And if that's the case, what if instead of going to the ex, you just discuss your need that's not being met with your current partner, and then come to a way for her to or him to fill that need, to meet that need, and then you don't need to go outside of the relationship and direct energy somewhere else. That really belongs with your partner. I mean, we really believe in sacred partnership, and that your partner is your,
that's really where you want to invest your energy. And not to a point where it's codependency, but definitely to a place where you are working to become a whole person yourself, and your partner helps you in the process or serves as a mirror at times in that process. But if there's a need that you're trying to meet somewhere else, that can be a red flag.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like it's probably true, T, that if an ex wants to be friends with your husband, but not with you, that maybe she has other things in mind. Maybe not. I don't know. I feel like that could enter into an area of judgment, and I don't want to like put words or put ideas in somebody else's head, but
I mean, I think it depends. It depends on the circumstances, right? I mean, I think that I
think you felt this way.
I absolutely have in the past.
So,
and I don't know.
Elaborate on it.
I don't know if that was insecurity or if I genuinely believe that, right? If somebody was willing to if an ex wants to be your friend so much that they want to talk to you almost on a daily basis, then at that point, why not establish a true friendship and say, hey, let's all hang out. Let's all go out to lunch. I'd love to meet your partner. She seems amazing. You seem really happy. And if I want you in my life. I want us to have this friendship. And so obviously now you're in a partnership. I don't want to make her uncomfortable. Let's all try to have this friendship together. Maybe that might work, right? Like, I think that's...
T, did you actually try that? And was it rejected, or?
Because I definitely see, for example, I don't know, I'm thinking about like my ex where I wasn't friends with his wife on social media, but I had never met her. I didn't know her, and he didn't, we didn't speak often enough for it to be like, all right, if I'm going to talk to you consistently, I should be friends with your wife. But, like you have a friend from many, many years ago that I've never met in person, but we've become friends on social media because you guys are friends. And, I've managed to make a lot of friends as a result of some of your female friends being like, oh my God, you seem happy in your relationship, because you're talking about me, perhaps in those conversations, they've become my friends. I feel like that's happens a lot. And I mean, I think the same thing, right? We have I have friends that have become your friends over time. And I think that's more of a balanced friendship, I think, where there's that openness where we can all be friends if there's absolutely nothing uncomfortable or weird about it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is definitely the more mature route. At the same time, I feel like not everybody's ready for that, right? Some people don't have that level of emotional intelligence to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then maybe it's not a great idea for you to maintain a relationship with someone who's not on that same level.
Exactly. So I think I think the point still stands, right? Yeah. If it's somebody who's not on that emotional maturity level to say, let's all be friends, then maybe that's an area where you're like, well, I don't have to speak to this person consistently or, as often as they want to.
Yeah.
So I guess there are boundaries. There are different levels of friendship as well. I mean, that's not to say you have to cut everybody off just because they don't want to be friends with your partner.
So what are the tools we've discussed so far? Vulnerability.
Yes.
Being willing to dig deep and be like brutally and painfully honest about what it is that you're actually feeling, aside from the trigger of whatever it is. Communication.
Empathy.
Right. The partner who's not triggered needs to be willing to empathize with the trigger, because probably we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
So I've been on both sides of this coin. Yeah, and empathizing and understanding that it's not an attack on you if they're uncomfortable with, you having a relationship with your ex or having some token from that relationship.
Yeah.
What else?
I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe getting to some sort of compromise, trying to get to the core of what that feeling of insecurity is, right? It's not just, we had this conversation and as we were talking about it, the conversation turned to, it's not just the poster, right? It's all of the associations with this ex and things that have happened in the past that perhaps make me uncomfortable. So the poster is just a manifestation, a symbol of it.
So T says she did suggest to her husband's ex to be friends, and it turns out she wanted to rekindle the relationship. So guys, I would say, or not just guys, but girls too, this has happened several times where I denied Vanessa's intuition. She had an intuition about something. She said, hey, I think this is what's happening. And I was like, nah. And her intuition was right. So sometimes that intuition is going to be right, and we're not going to want to hear it. And, but in both cases, it's good, right? Because it ends up validating your intuition. If we let it play out anyway, and then it can validate her intuition, and it's more powerful for me to see, oh shit, she was right. Maybe next time I'll pay a little bit more attention to her perspective on it.
And that doesn't mean that, that would mean that in the future you have to do as I say, because my intuition says this, but perhaps be a little bit more mindful of it and say, okay, wait a minute, what is she feeling? Let's take a look at it. Let's take an objective look at it, because it is very hard to be objective with your ex, right? You're like, I know my ex better than you would know my ex, so I know what she really means. And sometimes as women, we kind of know how other women operate, and that's not to say that I can judge any other woman in the world. I'm just saying sometimes we have this like feeling of something going on, and like I said, that doesn't mean you have to act on that feeling. Simply just pay attention to it. Let's observe it. Let's see how this is going to play out. What's really behind all of this? But I think it does make a big, one of the biggest, I think, takeaways from all of this is having the conversations. Like, what is really uncomfortable about this? What don't you feel okay with? In this case, T kind of had this feeling like, why is this woman wanting to be friends with my husband, but not friends with me? If it's just a casual friendship, then you should have no issue being friends with the spouse of your friend, right? I mean, I feel like we're friends with many couples, with many. Mm-hmm. All of our friends are kind of friends with both of us at this point. And so it's not that we have to be best friends. I don't have to be best friends with all of Danny's female friends, but we kind of have this mutual respect for each other. And I think that that's part of it if you're the friend outside of the couple, right? If I'm friends with an ex, I want to be mindful of my ex and his new partner to make sure that I'm not overstepping any boundaries, that I'm not doing something that would make that person uncomfortable. I would never want to do that. And I think that's something that is important to be mindful of as well.
Faux show. Hey, Veronica.
Hi, we missed you too.
I wonder if any of our exes are watching the stream. That would be really interesting.
That would.
Right. If anybody is watching, put a comment in. What do you think about what we're saying? That would be really insane.
That would.
But cool, I think.
Yeah, also. I think so. I mean,
don't be afraid. Just
like I said, I feel like in our situation, because your ex is part of our life, I think that we've kind of worked through all of that stuff to kind of get to a place where we can establish a friendship. And I think that's pretty awesome. And I think that a lot of people miss out on the opportunity to have those friendships. I mean, if if an ex wants to be your friend but feels uncomfortable about being my friend, they kind of miss out on the opportunity to have both of us as friends, to have a support system, especially if you're in a place of wanting to help other people, right? I think we forget about this concept of community. We can be community. We can be friends. We can work through stuff together.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've been doing with my ex-wife. I mean, not so much with your ex, because he's not cooperative, and maybe that's kind of like a good example, right? So my ex-wife, and maybe to some level she's kind of forced to be cooperative because we do have a son together, and so we have to, but our relationship has progressed past just being civil and nice to each other because of Xander. It really has, where they send pictures to each other of the kids when they're doing things, and it's really gotten more into like, and we've had dinner together too. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes. We just invited her to come with us to 4th of July barbecue. She didn't accept the invitation. She had other plans, but like, that's where we are in the relationship, where, and I'm not going to say it didn't feel a little awkward to extend the invitation, right? But I mean, we're at that place where it wasn't like out of the question, right?
Yeah.
And I think an ex-wife is like the ultimate ex, right? Or an ex-husband, somebody that you're actually committed to, married to. And for me, I have a child with.
Yeah. So I think if you can make it work with that type of ex,
right, you can make it work with
any type of ex,
exactly.
As long as everybody's willing to be honest and put the effort into it.
Right. And unfortunately, her ex-husband is not willing to, but it's not like they have kids to.
Yeah, we don't have anything really to that needs to be communicated. I mean, with Danny's ex, we have to speak on a weekly basis, almost on a daily basis, because of all sorts of arrangements, just logistics of co-parenting a child.
Mm-hmm. Does jealousy or anger ever come into the picture at all anymore? I mean, I guess in some sense, yesterday's issue was a jealousy to some degree, right? It didn't turn into anger, but I think it's because we've practiced so much being vulnerable, communicating, and being empathetic that this time, but honestly, this was a very low level, right? It wasn't like extreme jealousy. It wasn't me talking to anybody. It was just an object that has an association. So is that to say that there couldn't, like in the future, we're past that? No, I don't think so. We probably could. There could come instances,
there could be triggers, come up,
where we could still get angry. One of the things that I think for us personally in our relationship is the anger doesn't last as long. Arguments used to last days before, and now generally, like, we actually had an argument just before coming on the air. We were having breakfast, and she said something that triggered me, and I did get angry, but it went within like 10-15 minutes. We talked through it. It was over. Right. So yeah, anger definitely still can come up for sure. I'm not Jesus or Buddha where I'm like totally zen and there's no anger anymore.
And I think that's like kind of the point of being a human being, right? To have all of these experiences, to experience anger, jealousy, frustration, sadness. There's a whole spectrum of feelings, and we're going to experience them. We've kind of gotten to a place where we allow those feelings to come out and we express them. I think in the past, I especially had a tendency to suppress everything. If I felt angry, I would just be quiet, and then I would just be passive aggressive a lot.
Yeah. And I was on the other end of the spectrum where I would just blurt out and react. Anytime I would feel something, I felt anger, I was throwing things across the room. She would make fun of me like I was the Hulk, saying I was going to,
Hulk smash
the building or throw, like whatever. So for me, there was no contemplation at all. She contemplated too much without expressing, and I expressed too much without contemplating. Right. So we really had to meet in the middle, and we're getting to a place, and I definitely have a lot farther to go with the crashing and bashing. Like I still, I'm not throwing things anymore, but like I'll still snap back, So I haven't completely licked that. And ironically, the argument we had before the show was because she told me I was angry. And I got angry that she told me I was angry.
But, we're all works in progress, right? I mean, I'm still overanalyzing a lot of my feelings and emotions. So like yesterday, I was like, is this jealousy? Am I feeling jealous over a poster? Like that seems so silly and insignificant. And so then I'm like thinking it through, like, am I really jealous about it though? Why does it bother me? Do I want it here? What does this mean? And is it silly for me to tell him not to put it up? So I went through the whole cycle of thoughts trying to figure out what I was even feeling. And, this kind of goes back to the short movie you were talking about sharing last week, where we all have like different ideas in our heads. Like I make the comment of, isn't this poster associated with your ex? And you're like, yeah, so, and then, and you go off thinking about, what type of frame you're going to get for the poster. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out if I'm crazy for not wanting that poster up.
What Vanessa's referencing is I did a short film in college where this couple's in a car coming home from a date, and the girl asked the guy, like, oh, do you realize it's been 6 months since we started dating? And he's quiet. And so she thinks he's like, oh my God, like 6 months, maybe, like she starts to question the commitment of whether he's committed to the relationship. Meanwhile, he's just thinking about, yeah, 6 months ago, I took the car to the mechanic and they ripped me off. And he starts like getting huffy, like angry about the way the mechanic ripped him off. She feels his mood change and thinks it's about being in a relationship. So she ends up like breaking up with him. And he has no idea what happened. So it's just kind of like the difference between how men and women think, or how masculine and feminine think.
And how everybody thinks, right? Everybody has had different experiences, different situations. Perhaps my experiences with my ex-husband might be some of the things that are triggered in this relationship that to you might not be such a big deal, right? You're like, what difference does it make if I put this poster up? Like, it's not that serious. But I could have so many other associations that have absolutely nothing to do with the poster. Just associations I've made in past relationships, associations I've made in past experiences within our relationship that don't even come into your interpretation of the situation, right?
Yeah. One of the shows that I think really illustrates this well, honestly, it really helped me to understand like subjective point of view, is The Affair on, is that HBO or Showtime? The Affair on Showtime. This show, if you haven't seen it, it's really good. I mean, some of it's like soap opera-ish, but the way they shoot it, they tell the story, the same story from each of the characters' point of view. So they'll have the first 20 minutes of the show will be from one particular character's point of view. And they see it totally differently. They just have completely different perspectives. Sometimes the clothes they're wearing is completely different. Like, so just kind of like this, the way that you view a situation, you assume the other person is seeing the exact same thing you're seeing, but they're really not. We just all have these subjective biases and associations that get conjured up and totally change our view of how. So she can make a comment to me and I think she's being nasty, but she was really just being funny, or she thought she was being funny, but I just don't see the joke, right? And I think this is really just showing, it's very indicative of how our society operates, right? Like everything's masks, no masks, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, right?
And I don't think it's just society. I think it's consciousness, the way our mind works in general. I was leafing through a book yesterday at Barnes & Noble that was talking about that. It was talking about, it seemed interesting. I don't even remember the title of the book right now, but it was talking about consciousness. And the example the guy gave was that he used to call his mom every day when he was in college. And one day he forgot to call her. It was just such a, whatever thing. He was busy, didn't call her. And she freaked out. She was calling his roommate. She got to the point where she was yelling at the roommate and saying, "You're not letting me know that something happened to my son. He's probably dead and I'm going to find out anyway. So why are you keeping this from me?" Like, she went totally crazy. And to anybody else, that would have been like, why did this lady go totally nuts? But then he goes on to explain her experiences. She was an immigrant from Poland, and some of the experiences she went through, and how she was like, her mom, I think, was ripped out of the house at one point in this very traumatic experience. And so the point of that story was to say that our reactions aren't just like, oh, this person was having an overreaction. It triggered a feeling from a trauma that she experienced when she was much younger.
What do you mean? Like in Poland, was it the Nazis ripping her mother out of the house?
I believe so, yeah. And so so that experience got triggered when she didn't hear from her son and created this reaction. Now, anybody that doesn't know that would be like, this lady's absolutely crazy. She's so overprotective. She went nuts when she didn't hear from her son. But we don't know the experiences that that each person goes through. So we all see situations through the lens of our own experiences, of our own consciousness, of our own traumas. And if we take the time to look at it that way and have empathy for the way people react, perhaps it'll change our perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really did love that affirmation. This no longer defines me. I forgive myself and I set it free.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've been working on, is forgiving myself for things. And sometimes it's harder to forgive and set it free, but I will try this one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's been an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I feel a little exhausted now, honestly.
Well, thank you so much for your comments. Thank you for joining us. Danny's gonna share our social media handles, so you could give us a follow and check us out.
We are on all the major platforms, of course, but I always like to promote this because in today's day and age, the big social media companies are openly saying that they're going to censor certain points of views. During the coronavirus debacle circus, I was going to say pandemic, but it's really circus. They were censoring vitamin C posts. Apparently now it's a conspiracy theory that vitamin C boosts your immune system. So if you're interested in a social media platform that does not censor and is not selling your information the way Facebook does, Minds.com and Float app are two great social networks that I found have like kind of similar feel to Facebook, where you have a lot of that same functionality. So you're not like giving up. I've seen some of the other ones, alternatives, and you give up a lot of functionality, and they seem very basic. But I really like Minds and Float. So check them out. You can find us there. Again, we're on all the major platforms as well. And we'd really appreciate it if you'd give us a like and maybe share one of our episodes. If you feel like this episode has helped you in some way, share it. And maybe some of your friends might get some value out of it too. You're helping us spread the word, and we appreciate that.
And leave us some comments on stuff that you're going through. Like we've mentioned before, this is not a live stream to say, hey, we figured it all out. We're like gurus in relationships. Mm-hmm. We're trying to figure it out too. And this is intended to be a space, a community space, where we can all kind of talk through the stuff that we're going through together. If you guys have advice for us, we'd love to hear it. If you'd like to be on the show and kind of talk about your experiences as well, we'd love to have you. So email us, contact us on social media, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you have any topic ideas, show ideas, we'd like to hear those as well. So enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.